It's Reed Young, aka Shuda here, and I'm back bringing you another cool hand that I found. It's a 10-20 three-handed. We're in an aggressive no-limit hold'em game. So I'm going to show you guys a bunch of pretty cool spots from one hand here. So right off the bat, you can see that the button min raises in the small blind. We have a 3-bet, which is typical of an aggressive three-handed game, especially when the button's min-raising a lot. We expect him to call with a lot of hands pre-flop, so it's very likely that we'll be re-raising hands like King, Jack, and other hands like that. You might not re-raise quite as often if you were make it 3 big blinds on the button. So the big blind 4-bets, and he should be doing this with a pretty wide range, given that the button's going to be opening with a wide range, something like 60%, 70% of his hands, and the small blind's going to be countering that by re-raising a wide range. So when the big blind 4-bets, the button folds and the small blind has an interesting decision. So he's getting pretty great pot odds here. It's about 130 more for him to call, and the pot is about $500. So I mean, he's getting pretty sweet pot odds. Can't blame him for calling with a pretty wide range here, getting almost 3.5 to 1. So the small blind ends up calling. I think it's a good play with a lot of hands, but you don't want to overdo it because you're going to have some reverse implied odds issues post flop, meaning if you're calling with hands like King Jack here and the big blind's only cold 4-betting with King Queen and higher for the sake of argument, then you're going to be in a lot of trouble when a lot of money goes in the pot. Additionally, the positional disadvantage here is pretty miserable for a huge pot like this, where the big blind really gets to control how much money goes in very often, and you can play pretty well against your range, since you're going to want to have a lot more hands here than just slow played aces and kings. So it's pretty easy for the big blind to pick you apart on a lot of boards. So you want to be careful. On the flop, we check is the small blind, and the big blind bets $120. So an extremely small continuation bet, which I think is fine given that most of our range should just completely miss this board. So what that means is if we're going to be calling any to bluff later, we're going to want to use hands like Jack 10 of hearts, or hands that have a backdoor straight draw and a backdoor flush draw are best, because then we can hit some turns and check raise all in and balance with the times that we check raise all in with a queen in our hand. So it's important that you play both types of hands both ways to not make yourself exploitable or readable. The turn goes check check, and what I would say about the big blind's range here, given the extremely small flop continuation bet and how much the 6 just is still disconnected with the board, I think he could probably get away with a profitable betting opportunity here as a bluff, just expecting to fold out floats about always. So maybe an exploitive play there, but you can see what I mean if he bets $300 to win $840, and if a disproportionate amount of our range is hands like 10-9 suited, then we're in trouble. So you want to make sure you're not floating too widely, especially with the big blind, who clearly understands how ranges hit certain boards, and he's going to cater his bet size to reflect that. So the turn goes check check. The big blind's range here, I think, given all of what we just said, is going to include a lot of bluff catchers. So when you're bluffing the river here, you want to be pretty careful, because I think you're going to run into a made hand or a stubborn ace high a lot of the time. But you do need to be bluffing some of the time to balance with the times that you have a queen in your hand. So we check kind of a fairly innocuous river. Once we check, it looks like we have showdown value a lot of the time. So what I'm saying about bluffing here is you're not really expecting to win by checking down jack high here that often. So we check, and the big blind goes all in for about 1.6 times pot. I think it's a pretty standard bet size by him, just given that our entire range is bluff catchers. So to exploit that and to maximize his value, he can go all in with his entire range, his range of hands for bluffs and for value. So not only does he put us in a difficult position with bluff catchers, but when we call, he makes the most possible. So another cool thing about the overbet is that if we think his turn giving up range is quite wide, then this balances nicely for the hands that he's pot controlled, like pocket kings on the turn, where he thought if he bet, he's only going to fold out 10-9 suited, but if he checks back, maybe he can induce a bluff from a float. So talking about the small blinds range, there aren't too many medium pocket pairs with which you'd re-raise pre-flop and then just call a 4-bet out of position. So even hands like 10s might decide to go ahead and go all in and negate the positional disadvantage post-flop. So if that's the case, then the small blind's checking range is really reduced to nothing but ace high and hands that aren't strong enough to value bet the river but did improve. So some hands like 5-4, 6-7 of diamonds maybe, hands that could turn a straight flush draw and check raise all in to balance with the Queen X hands. So big blind can overbet here pretty thinly and just let the small blind figure it out from there and hopefully get some thin calls. So you can see it looks pretty ridiculous, but the way we've explained the hand, it makes perfect sense for the small blind to have 5-4 suited here and the big blind to take down a nice hand with King 6 offsuit. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I think it's pretty cool. There are a lot of good spots in it, and it looks pretty ridiculous, but I would call it fairly standard. So let me know what you guys think in the comments section. And if you enjoy videos like this, make sure to tell some of your friends on Twitter or Facebook. That would really help me out and get this channel going. So take care, guys.